the Trump team, not only China, but also many other partners, especially from APEC, they are also getting more prepared to team up closely to guard against the possible slap of tariffs and other type of restrictions.
Professor Liu, let me interrupt you here, sorry. What do you think China is taking away from the past 4 years and what not to do in handling U.S.-China relations? In one sentence, please.
Well, that's the red lines that President Xi has really drawn.
Well, not on China's point.
So
it's a tough one, I know.
From the China's perspective, that we are not really going to be offering any type of destructive forms, but we do also expect a reciprocal respect from any other party. Of course, most outstandingly from the United States, with regard to its governance and also with regard to its own managing its modernization rights.
Nathan, what is the big takeaway from the American side, or from your side personally as an observer to bilateral ties? Because one of the things that we really remember, and most telling to me, is this BBC headline about the so-called spy balloon incident. In the end, this story says the spy balloon did not collect information, says Pentagon. I think this headline deserves to be framed and hung somewhere as a reminder of how hysteria, overreaction can really be not just misleading, but will make oneself a laughing stock. But anyway, that's my take. What is your take? The biggest takeaway, what not to do for the United States?
I want to make two major points. So the first, I'm not going to relitigate the spy balloon. That's already very far in the past as far as I'm concerned. I think the first is, I'm quite certain that the relationship in the years to come will become more turbulent. And we will look back on this last few years as a period of relative stability. And when we do that, I think a question we can ask ourselves will be, did we get enough out of the period of stability that we should have? Because it will get more turbulent. Did we restore economic ties? Did we restore people-to-people ties? Did we do enough on climate and health? Because all of those things will be harder in the years ahead. So that's one point I want to make. And then the second point is, as things get harder, which they will, I'm especially hopeful that the steps we've taken in the last year and a half, 2 years, to restore some basic level of people-to-people exchange will remain. There are lots of other things that will get very turbulent, but I hope that both sides will at least value some degree of people-to-people exchange, so that component, which many of us, including some of us on this call, have tried to restore in the last couple of years, does not go away.
Okay, let's not forget Professor Huang. Professor Huang, sorry for keeping you waiting here. What really has to be in mind as we enter the next 4 years? It seems there's a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unease, but aren't we better prepared, knowing that we already lived the first 4 years under President Trump?
Sure, I think there will be a lot of uncertainties and turbulence with Donald Trump that comes into power. But if anything that or lesson that both of us can learn that, for example, China never took any confrontational approach towards the United States, always approached the United States in a kind of cooperative, manageable way. That does not mean that China is afraid of any confrontation. China is not. Actually, China already laid out some red line. That means China's red lines cannot be crossed. But in the years to come, I think China still maintain, as we know, a very open-minded, open towards the outside world. Of course, Donald Trump administration may do some very terrible or harsh way against China, but does not mean that the entire world there will do the same. China will be more open and more friendly, more approachable towards all the other countries, including those in the Asian Pacific, because if history can tell us anything, that, for example, 2001, there were two major trade agreements signed. One is the NAFTA, which goes nowhere, mainly because the United States behavior. But another one is a 10+1 China side free trade agreement with ASEAN. Look with ASEAN is. I mean, it's a win-win situation. The economy in this area, both in China and the 10 member countries of ASEAN, increased tremendously. I think China will just follow the same route, that is open to others, and also try others are open to China. I think strike a win-win strategy cooperation and equal, of course.
Professor Huang, you did mention China laid out the 4 red lines, and I want to ask you this. The 4 red lines, namely Taiwan, which is very clear, it's repeated many times, and then China mentioned democracy and human rights, China's path and systems, and its development interests. Why do you think China mentions democracy and human rights this time? This is clearly for President Trump and his team.
Yes, I think the democracy is a kind of not only kind of value but also way of governance. Every country and every nation has its own right to choose the democracy they practice in the way they think their country best. I think democracy is not somebody's privilege or somebody's monopoly. It should not be defined by only one country or government. Worst of all is I should not be lecture others how to do the same quote-unquote democracy.
Okay.
So same with human rights. I mean, it's a common value. I mean, everybody wants human rights. Everybody wants to practice the best way they govern their own society. So when China mentioned democracy and human rights, it's also cross-line. This means please do not tell us, do not lecture us. Do not what democracy is. Do not define democracy the way you want. It is not human democracy. I think that's the line very clear here.
Okay, Ms. Sanborn, how do you read these 4 red lines, especially the second one I just mentioned?
I'd like to read it in a slightly different perspective because although we could see there's kind of historical differences between the United States and China on what, as the professor said, what rights are primary and how each nation and culture decides their priorities, and the U.S. has put a lot of emphasis on political and even religious liberty in China on cultural, social, economic rights. But I think China's language on human rights has changed in our part of the world. Coming from the developing world, the global south, we're seeing the Chinese talk about the respect for human rights when their companies are overseas, when they're investing in new societies. We've seen a lot more language coming from China about respecting human rights elsewhere where they're operating. And we think that's encouraging. And we do hope that the message will remain with the new U.S. administration as well, that it has to be respected.
Let's definitely keep a close watch on that as well. A lot of things to watch out for. But G20 is around the corner, and President Xi actually has already arrived in Brazil, and he has published an article about China-Brazil ties, and this year's theme is building a just world and sustainable planet. Next on, is there going to be an important item on the agenda of the upcoming U.S. administration?
It's not too hard to predict that the new administration in the U.S. will not approach the problem of climate change in the way that the last administration did. For those of us who believe that climate is the existential crisis of our time, that is disappointing. And it is an opportunity, frankly, for China to play a leadership role, as the rhetoric that you just indicated suggests that it could. I think this is very much an opportunity for China. Whether or not China takes that opportunity is an open question to me, but certainly we know that the U.S. at the national level is not going to be as active in the arena of combating climate change as the last administration was.
Professor Liu, is that what the Chinese is thinking about the G20, for instance, using this potentially as an opportunity to increase its influence? Because it's the U.S. decision whether to engage with the bloc or not.
I think you're absolutely right, because China never really imposed its own agenda onto the global, either trading platform or other climate change issues. So it is, yes, the U.S., the upcoming administration that is going to even withdraw from the climate change treaty and also to revert more to the fossil-based energy. So therefore, China is not really there to actively grasp such a sort of leadership. It's grown on a natural basis because, for one, China has the largest economy, and we are going forward, even if it is an uphill battle for the high-quality development. So China is already effectively taking the leadership in generating the new batteries, the solar panels, wind powers, and e-vehicles, etc. So the U.S. is going to be more challenging, and therefore the put a preemptive tariff against the Chinese, all types of e-equipment to be imported into the U.S. But now they should really reflect that why they should leave such sort of future-oriented model of development to the other countries like China.
Many thanks to my guests. I have to leave at that. With that, we come to the end of the special edition of The Point with me, Shan, coming to you from Beijing. As usual, follow me on Facebook and X using the handle in Beijing. You're welcome.
我爱你 I love you. 我爱你 This might be the easiest way to say I love you, since there are so many other romantic expressions. No matter if you're a rookie or a sophisticated learner.
我来北京5年了，我是本地人。
There is definitely something that will interest you. Check out Takeaway Chinese, a word that starts with 你好.
Listening to CGTN Radio. Here. Experience the musical classics of the East. Mingle with the masters of Chinese music.
这种召唤的女性。
Music Talks. Witness the sound of antiquity and modernity. This is CGTN Radio. Here for the friend.
I'm Chinese President Xi Jinping says he looks forward to having an in-depth exchange of views with Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva on further enhancing relations. He made remarks in a written statement upon his arrival in Rio de Janeiro for the 19th G20 summit and a state visit to Brazil. Xi says China-Brazil relations stand at an important historical juncture of building on past achievements and forging ahead. The two countries celebrate the 50th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic ties this year. President Xi said he looks forward to the G20 summit as a chance to collaborate with global leaders to advance multipolarity, inclusive globalization, and the G20's role as a key platform for international economic cooperation. Paulo Cabral has more on what to expect from the G20 summit. Brazil, as the president of the G20, this year has actually established three main axes for discussion. That's what's going to happen here in the venue in Rio de Janeiro. The first one is social justice and the fight against inequality. Brazil will launch the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Against Poverty and has proposed the idea of establishing a tax on the super rich. Another thing is the sustainable development and transition to clean energy. Second axis of discussion here. Another aspect, another issue where Brazil has a very strong action. And finally, the third axis proposed by Brazil is the discussion on the reform of global governance. That includes the financial institutes like the IMF and the World Bank, and also political institutions, particularly those connected to the United Nations. China Media Group is set to launch the Portuguese version of a popular Chinese TV show in Brazil. Season 3 of the classic supported by Xi Jinping are broadcast on several major Brazilian platforms. The program expounds on a wide selection of ancient Chinese books and classic sentences quoted in President Xi's speeches and articles. It focuses on the themes of reform and innovation, common prosperity, ecological and environmental protection, cultural inheritance, and diversity. APEC members have called for effective multilateral cooperation as areas such as trade, investment, the environment, food security, and energy security are facing challenges. They made the remarks in the 2024 APEC Leaders Machu Picchu Declaration released following the 31st APEC Economic Leaders Meeting in Lima. The leaders of APEC economies say they'll accelerate discussions with other WTO members with the view to have a fully and well-functioning dispute settlement system accessible to all members this year. They've also reaffirmed their commitment to enhancing supply chain connectivity to establish secure, resilient, sustainable, and inclusive supply chains.
A Reuters report says U.S. President Joe Biden's administration has allowed Ukraine to use long-range missiles supplied by the U.S. to strike Russia. To confirm the move's a major change to Washington's policy in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. It comes 2 months before President-elect Donald Trump takes office on January 20th. The White House and the U.S. State Department have declined to comment.